This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. We're fortunate tonight to have as our guest my good friend Luther Strange, better known to a lot of us as Big Luther Strange. We've had Luther on for 3 or 4 times. He comes on annually. This is his annual visit to Alabama Politics, and Luther's no stranger to the show. He's been around the state. Just came from Irondale, speaking of the Irondale Civic Club up there, and we appreciate him taking time to be with us today. Alabama's Attorney General Luther Strange.
Steve, good to be with you.
Thank you, pal. Luther, you know, I've had several guests on the show since you were here. Shelby's been on and some other legislators, and they all refer to your height. But you know, Shelby's about 6'4".
He might be taller than that, Steve.
I had a picture made with him. We were having dinner the other night, and back in February, and we had a picture made together. And I'm almost 6'6".
I thought you were. He's pretty close to your height.
He really is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't shrink any.
I like talking to you because we look eye to eye, Steve.
Well, actually, Kowalski had to move your chair back before you got here. I said, Kowalski, what are you doing? He says, I'm moving.
Well, between my size 15 shoes and everything, we can't get too close.
I know, but anyway, everybody always refers to your height, and viewers, he is 6'9", and the only other politician I've ever known about that height was old Big Jim, and for that era,
oh yeah,
I mean, you know, being 6'9", 6'9" is tall now, and they always make some allusion to you and I and all of us having a basketball team.
I know.
Remind our viewers, I want to remind our viewers that Luther did play college basketball. He played at Tulane. He grew up in Birmingham. Played at Shades Valley High School and was, I'm sure, all state or all city. Were you all state?
All state, and
you were center in high school. You were 6'9". Were you 6'9" in high school?
I was 6'9" in high school and played on a great team, Steve. We played for the state championship.
What year would that have been?
1971, and it was the big game back in those days.
You're 2 years younger than me, yeah.
That's right, and we played in the big state championship finals, the big school final in Tuscaloosa at Coleman Coliseum. And we
Who y'all playing?
Played Parker High School, great Birmingham team, they had great athletes. And we lost in overtime.
2 Birmingham schools playing for state championship.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great game. We lost in overtime, last second shot. It could have gone either way. And so I had a good high school career.
Now, when you were in high school, you being recruited by several schools because of your height?
I was lucky. I got recruited to Auburn in Alabama. They came to see all my games. And I had a problem, Steve, because I came, you know, from a mixed marriage. My mom went to Alabama and my dad went to Auburn. So it was creating issues there. So I ended up going to Tulane.
And did you start at Tulane at center?
I did.
At
Got to play at
6'9", were you the tallest guy on the team?
I was. You know, back in those days, I'd be a guard now, I guess. You know, Steve, you'd be
forward,
a small,
probably,
yeah. But we had great teams. Tulane was a great school for me. I probably would have gone, and I stay in touch with Coach Newton and Coach Sanderson, you know, from Alabama days.
Yeah.
I probably would have gone to Alabama, except they were getting ready to sign a guy named Leon Douglas.
Oh, God, he was great,
who was a great player. And
Leon about 6'11".
He was about 6'11", 6'10", big, strong guy.
He was great.
He was a great player, and he was going to play the same position. And I thought, you know, I don't know. I really want to play. And so
he was one of the best centers I've ever had.
Great center. And several of my buddies, John Dill from North Alabama, a bunch of other guys played at Alabama, and we stayed in close touch.
Went on law school and then came back and started practicing law in your hometown of Birmingham. Luther, now your sons are 27 and 23 now, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're tall. I met them. One of them, the first time you came to see me on my show, you brought the one that worked for Joe Bonner.
That's right. Steve, well, I appreciate you remembering that. He's our oldest son, Luke, is both our boys are 6'8". They just not quite as tall as I am, but
they are 6'8" then.
But Melissa, my wife's 5'10". You know,
is Melissa 5'10"?
She's 5'10". So anyway, our oldest son Luke is working for Joe Bonner. He's been there for 5 years, and he's getting ready to get married in August, Steve. So we're excited.
He met the girl at Van Washington.
He did. Great young lady who worked for George Allen, you know, the senator from Virginia, and her father's a longtime sheriff up in Fairfax County. So we're married into a great family.
Now, your son is graduating from college this year, his younger son, too.
Our younger son, yeah.
But now, you and Melissa been married about 35, 40 years now, haven't you?
It seems like 40, but it's only been 30, Steve.
30 years, okay. And we have a friend, a joint friend named Sam Upchurch,
Yeah.
whose actually grandfather, his mama's father, started Liberty National Life Insurance
That's
Company.
right.
He was Frank Sanford.
That's right.
And he gave you a picture, and Luther, before he got on the show, y'all brought me, Luther and I and Sam are old friends, he brought me a picture to show you how his legacy of playing basketball. His grandfather was, you're Luther Strange III.
I'm actually the third. And so my grandfather, and Sam was nice enough to send this picture. He's doing a little research into something or another, and he came across this picture, and he said, this guy might be related to you. And the nice thing about that, Steve, is, you know, my grandmother, of course, used to say, you know, your grandfather played basketball and all. And I thought, well, you know, but
You never know him. He died before you were.
Well, he died when I was, you know,
Little.
maybe fairly young, and so I never knew that part of him. But here's this article with him featured, and you and I were talking about. You go and look at who they played back in 1911. Birmingham High School played the University of Georgia. They played LSU. I mean,
In high school?
in high school, and the scores were like 21-20. You know.
You had not seen it. When did Sam give that to you?
I just got it on the way over here to see you.
He brought it for you?
I brought it. I knew you'd get a kick out of it.
See that picture, because we may have be able to get it up on the screen of Luther's granddaddy. Show him which one it is, Luther, right there.
There you go, right there on the
On the
far right, on
kneeling.
kneeling. And so that, you know, it's funny to see proof of something that you've heard about all your life. And there you have it. So
That's right off the press, y'all. We just got a copy of that. And he grew up in Birmingham also,
he
didn't
grew up in Birmingham. That's right. Birmingham High School, Steve, which I'm not sure
he? It exists
you know,
now.
even exists. I'm sure it does.
Where it was,
Yeah. Isn't that
That's
something?
interesting. So you got a heritage in basketball, and but you're doing a great job as Attorney General. Luther, let's talk about primarily, let's start off talking about the BP thing, because that's been kind of gotten on the radar screen, and people have not followed it like I thought they might.
Right.
That's a lot of money for Alabama. If you don't mind, tell our viewers sort of the history and your involvement in it, because you are not only involved, you're the lead counsel for all the states, I think.
That's right.
And what I respect about what you're doing is past attorney generals have farmed that litigation out to lawyers, and they made a gold mine amount of money
That's
the
right.
state should have wound up getting. You're doing it yourself. Your staff and you are doing it, and I appreciate that. So I want to tell our viewers that in past attorney generals have let this be a gravy train for their friends and cronies, if you will, and Luther's doing it himself. So all the money we're garnering from BP is going to be going straight to the state coffers, because Luther's our attorney general and our state lawyer.
Well,
Tell our viewers, just kind of give them not a long story of that thing, the BP thing.
I can sum it up pretty well,
Yeah.
Steve, I think, because it's an important case. The biggest environmental disaster in the nation's history. You know, our entire coastline was covered with oil. We just passed the 2-year anniversary of the spill. And in that time,
Luther, I forgot what month it occurred now.
it was in April.
April of 2010.
April of 2010. And so, Steve, we've just passed the 2-year anniversary. 11 people were killed. The impact on our state was twofold. Environmentally, spoiled our beaches. Now, a lot of that's been cleaned up, and knock on wood, you know, Steve, we're going to have a record year this year, and the coast looks great, and I encourage people to go and enjoy seafood and enjoy our coast. But then we had a huge economic impact, Steve, and you know, you were in the legislature, you understand the problems, but with the deficit of $400 million plus in our general fund, we lost millions of dollars in tax revenue in this event because people quit going to the beach, they quit buying things, sales tax revenue, all this stuff. So what we did is when I came into office, I knew we had great lawyers. I said, we'll do it ourselves. We'll keep the legal fees and everything for the people. We're going to do it as fast as we can, because, Steve, nobody wants to have one of those Exxon Valdez things that last 25 years and we never get our money. So I've been spending about 1 or 2 days a month in New Orleans in court, pushing for a trial date so we can hold BP and the others accountable. And where
Let
we
me stop you. Are there any other attorney generals taking the lead? I mean, actually do it? How many states are involved? Is us?
Well, there's 5 states, of course, that were affected. The 2 states that have been most active have been Alabama and Louisiana.
Is their attorney general actually going in there with you? Or
He just, in the last month or two, decided to get involved in the case personally. And so he's come aboard, and I welcome that. That's important. Louisiana's a little different. They've spent a lot of money on outside legal fees. They've probably spent $15 million. We took a different tack and decided to do it ourselves and work with lawyers.
How about Mississippi, what are they doing?
Mississippi's on the sidelines right now. They've just hired a firm of lawyers that may or may not get into the case. Florida's been on the sidelines, and then Texas is really not been too affected, so they're not big players in this. You know, I think Florida and Mississippi, they're hoping that BP is going to do the right thing and settle for a large amount. And I just don't take that approach. I don't think the only way we can get BP.
We in Louisiana were the worst hit.
We were. But Florida would tell you they're, you know, Panhandle area,
That's
Steve,
right.
the Destin area and all. I think if
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just
no,
curious about
I
that.
think I appreciate you mentioning that. The key, as I see it, is getting a trial date, which we now have, Steve. Just learned last week that January 14th is when the trial for the states will occur.
Now you like that judge, don't you?
I do. He's
fair.
been fair.
That's what I hear.
He's been good for us. What changed things, Steve, we were going to go to trial 2 months ago, but the private plaintiffs, you know, I represent the citizens of the state of Alabama as a whole, as the People's Law Firm. The private plaintiffs, individuals and businesses that were damaged who hired lawyers and sued BP, they reached a settlement across the Gulf. It's a $7.5 billion settlement. The court wants to review that settlement and approve it so private individuals can get their money. So he's postponed our trial until January the 14th. But I'm looking forward to that date because I think, Steve, we'll be in a position where we can either hold them accountable or possibly get a fair settlement.
Now when does the trial start?
January 14th of next year. So that gives us several months to get ready. We're ready to go now. But I think if we can get them in a position where we have leverage, they're facing a trial date, they don't want to go to trial, and they'll do something that might be fair to us in a settlement, which we welcome if it's fair, and that will help relieve a lot of financial pressure here in the state.
What are we asking for? We're asking for loss of revenue in the Education Trust Fund budget, some in the general fund.
Some in the general fund, all lost tax revenue that the state incurred across the board.
How do you ascertain that? Just what it was the year before and just go from there?
There are formulas that you use, and the way we've divided this up, Steve, is I'm handling the case against BP and the others to keep the pressure on them to do the right thing. The governor and the executive agencies like revenue and you know, wildlife and all the state agencies are calculating the damages. So the governor has his idea of what that is, and that's an ongoing process. Every state's doing that, by the way, Florida, Mississippi, and others, so that you can present a bill to BP and say, this is what you owe us. You need to pay us this, or you know, we're going to take you to court. So that's the process that we're going through. All I can say is it's multiple millions of dollars. We have a confident estimate, and we feel very good about our case. We just want to get our day in court.
So you're asking for Education Trust Fund money losses, general fund losses. What else are we asking for to be made whole on?
Well, it would be all of our tax revenue. So it's the whole range of
What
things.
about local governments?
Local governments are not part of Alabama's case, but many of them have sued BP. And individually as separate
They're not
counties.
part of your case.
Not
then.
part of my case, but we think that by the state leading the charge, that's helping our other communities get fair settlements. And so recently, Steve, for example, the city of Gulf Shores settled for public information, several $1 million. The counties of Baldwin and Mobile are in settlement negotiations. And my advice to them is, look, if you're getting a fair amount to make you whole for your lost tax revenue, then you should accept that amount, and that's up to you to decide. The other thing, Steve, to answer your question about the damages is, you know, there's a tremendous amount of cost that we've incurred to help clean up the beaches.
Right.
And we've done everything we can do, and will continue to do everything to make sure BP stays down there. They keep their machines running, because even though the beaches are probably as pretty as they've ever been, we know there's still some residual oil, what they call tar mats, Steve, that are off the coast of our shore in Louisiana and Florida. It's the old residue of the oil that's kind of settled to the bottom, and it's like asphalt almost. And it's probably more dangerous to remove it than it is just to leave it there and hope it just dissolves. But if a hurricane were to come through and churn it up and put it back on the shore, we want to make sure BP's there to clean it up and fix it. We can't stand another one of those.
How can you ascertain what that is cost would be? How y'all looking at that? How you determine what the charge BP for?
Well,
for
all
that
the counties.
Residual.
Well, that residual is that's a good question. It's sort of a guesstimate, if you will, but any final settlement on all these environmental damages, and this is where you putting the economic tax stuff aside, the environmental, we're dealing with the United States government. And the United States government, and this is where you get into the Restore Act in Congress, a lot of penalty money, penalties for the spill, will go into funds that will be used, best way to say it is sort of as a trust, to put the money aside so that if problems occur in the future, the money's available to fix it. And then probably, Steve, too, some special projects like berms to be created, state parks to be renovated. There'll be a whole bunch of serial sort of individual projects that the penalty money will go to pay for.
Will that settlement require that money to be put into a trust? That'd be, hopefully it might be good to do. Can you do that?
The tax money will come directly.
Directly,
The tax money will come
but
directly.
the residual ecological damage.
The environmental, it has to be dealt with through
long-term.
federal. Then you get into the federal laws. The federal laws create under the Oil Pollution Act and the federal laws that came out of the old Valdez spill back in the 70s in Alaska. The national government put in place a system so that you would have money put aside to fix the current problem, and then more money that goes in for future spills that might happen somewhere else. So,
Luther, how you think the case will? Are they actually going to? They may settle before the case gets going. Really.
They may, Steve. You know how litigation is. You've got a lawyer in your family. You never can predict. But all I know is that unless there's a specific trial date that's kind of holding their feet to the fire, there will be no incentive or pressure on them to settle. As long as BP keeps the money, they earn interest on it. They're happy to do that. By creating a trial date in January, which is the earliest one I think we could have gotten from the judge, we have a deadline now. And so our focus is, like I said, it would be great if they would settle and pay the states, all the states, what they owe. And they might, but they won't do it until we get close to trial, I think.
Luther, talking about the federal government, let's talk about moving from BP to the Health Care Reform Act, which I say 20 or so attorney generals.
26.
26 attorney generals are suing, are part of the Supreme Court case saying that the Obama health care plan, which passed 2 years ago, is unconstitutional.
That's right.
I've had 2 state senators sitting there where you are tell me that if they have to fund the mandates in that Health Care Act, if you think Medicaid's breaking the general fund now, you ain't seen nothing yet. What that's doing is shifting the burdens to the states.
Absolutely.
And it's just putting it on Medicaid.
Yeah.
Is what it's doing.
Yeah.
They said, I've had Cam Ward sat there.
Oh, yeah.
And several others who were on the budget committee. Jabos said it. Said, look, it will break. We're broke now. But if you think it's not, broken, it's going to be. So you've been involved personally in that also, haven't you?
Well, I have, Stephen. When that law was passed, the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, a lot of AGs around the country were concerned that it was a bridge too far for the federal government to start telling individuals that they had to buy a certain product, health insurance, or face a big penalty. That it really was beyond.
That's the gist of the litigation.
That's the gist of the litigation if you boil it all down. There's ways that the federal government can provide health care to people, like through taxes, Steve. They could raise everybody's taxes constitutionally, but what they did is because they don't like tax increases, they decided to call it a penalty. If you and I don't buy private insurance, and the idea was that's really more than the federal government's ever done in the past. And if we create that precedent, then there's nothing that they can't tell us we have to buy just because we're alive and breathing and we're in the commerce of the United States. So the 26 states joined together. We weren't given much chance at the beginning, Steve, but over time we started winning some victories. The case came through the Florida courts. The United States Supreme Court, I think, picked up on the issue. We petitioned them to hear the case, and I attended the arguments in Washington about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. And I'll tell you, Steve, the federal government had a difficult case to argue. The reports where their lawyer messed up and all this, but the truth was the judges were really concerned that, gosh, if we agree that the federal government can require you to buy something that you don't want to buy and you don't need, and just because you're alive, then where does it end? And the government can never give a principle as to exactly where they were going to draw that line. So we will learn in the end of June, Steve, when the Supreme Court rules, what the limits of federal authority are. They will rule in June, and it's really what I call a federalism issue, Steve. It really goes down to what is the federal power and the state power, how do they come together? It's similar to the issue that's being debated on the immigration front. There's got to be a role for the federal government, and there's a role for the state governments, and how far can they go? And so that's what's going to be interesting to watch and see. One particular case, and you and I have talked about it before, that I'm particularly interested in is a case involving Alabama that comes from this Obamacare issue, and that is involving the largest Christian broadcasting company in the world, really, is EWTN, and it's headquartered up in Irondale, and it's a Catholic broadcasting network, and Mother Angelica founded it, and they have a principal position, a religious position, that they don't want to pay for contraceptives or morning after pills for their employees. And it kind of became a story about contraception, which is really, it's not. It's really a story about religious freedom. And the way this came about was the Obamacare regulations said every insurance company, every employer, and then every insurance company has to provide contraception and morning after pills for their people they cover. Well, EWTN went out of their way to create an insurance system that was self-insured through Blue Cross, I think, that provided very generous health care coverage. It just didn't provide for contraceptive services to be paid for. You can get contraceptive services readily available everywhere. And so it became a question of religious freedom. And the bishops kind of caught into that. We joined that lawsuit because of the concern that I have that it's a religious freedom First Amendment issue, because if you can make a church, for example, a Catholic church, provide something they have a religious objection to, and our religious freedoms are protected in the First Amendment, Steve, as you well know, in our own Alabama Constitution, then where would that end, you know? And so these cases, I should add, Steve, are not costing the taxpayer of Alabama any money. They're principled positions. We're joining lawsuits with the other states, or in this case with EWTN, to take principled stands on these issues. What does it do to Alabama? Getting back to your point, if EWTN, just for an example, decided we're just not going to provide that coverage because we religiously, we have an objection to it, and they say we're not going to, they'd either have to pay a fine to the government of $750,000, which might make them lay people off, or they would just say, we're opting out of health care coverage, period, and then the employees would have to go out and find insurance somewhere else. A lot of them would have to come to Medicaid and our state system and cost us more money. So there are a lot of ramifications from this, a lot of big principled issues, and the good news is, Steve, we're going to learn what the rules are when the Supreme Court makes its decision at the end of June, and of course it'll have implications for the presidential elections and all kind of things.
It really will. So the two big ticket issues will be decided. The first one, the legality of, quote, Obamacare.
That's right.
Which you've been involved along with 25 other attorney generals and suing on behalf of the states, saying you can't make someone buy health insurance. That's the issue.
That's right.
And so that will be whether they're ruled unconstitutional or not. That'll be decided this year.
It'll be decided at the end of June this year, plenty of time before the election. And the other one that'll be decided, that's a big issue, of course, here in Alabama and in other states across the country, is the power of the states to work with the federal government to enforce the laws
I was going to ask you about
on
that.
illegal immigration. And however you feel about that controversial issue, you know, our position has always been that there ought to be a role for the states to play in getting the federal government to do its job of enforcing the law. And the courts, and I attended this argument too, Steve, 2 weeks ago in Washington, and I sat right as close as I practically am to you, and the judges were very concerned about this issue, and I think the federal government was a little surprised because they sort of have a policy, look, we're just not going to enforce the immigration laws on some people, but we'll enforce them if they're criminals or if they have a criminal background. And the court was like, you know, you don't get to choose what laws you want to enforce and don't want to enforce. The states, it just seemed clear to me that there was no problem in the court's eyes for the states to help the federal government. Say, look, we have someone here who may be here illegally. Do you want to know about it or not? The federal government can always ignore that. So I think there's going to be more discretion in the state's ability in that area than people thought, probably. But it'll be decided at the end of June again. So you have two big cases.
Immigration and the affordability of Obamacare Act will be decided this year.
Both will be decided this year within the next couple of months. So those are things to keep your eye on, Steve, because they'll set the ground rules on two big issues as to what the states can do, what the states can't do. And it'll probably have impacts on the election.
Yeah, It will be.
Yeah.
And then the BP thing probably something will happen in 2013 about it.
And that's what and my hope, Steve, is it'll be early 2013 because our general fund needs the money. You remember well, you know, when Bob James took some money from the oil and gas industry and created a trust. It's up to the legislature and the governor to decide what they want to do. My job is to get as much money as we possibly can to compensate the state and let the legislature and the governor do what they want with it.
Of course, as Attorney General, when I first met you, you were involved with national politics to a certain degree. I asked you about our good friend. We have a joint friend, our senior senator, Richard Shelby. Oh, yeah. Both have close friends.
Absolutely.
Shelby is aspiring, as you know, to be chairman of appropriations. I don't know whether you follow national politics or not anymore. A secondary thing that we'll be following in November is not just the presidential election, which will be paramount in most people's mind, but the control of the U.S. Senate. I wonder with Olympia Snowe retiring, you've got too much on your plate here being Attorney General to follow national politics much, but I mean, you and I both have been students of the U.S. Senate politics over the years. Shelby would like very much to be Chairman of Appropriations, and I don't know with Olympia Snowe's retirement or that will there's several that are quitting that may make it difficult. And they put a lot of money on that Massachusetts race.
They are, Steve, but you know, I know you talk to Senator Shelby all the time. He's a great friend of yours and mine, and I'm very optimistic. And I'm not sure that I know you remind your viewers, but you can't stress enough how important it is to have Senator Shelby and Senator Sessions in the key positions they're in.
It really is.
I don't think there's been a senator with as much seniority and experience as Richard Shelby has now on the financial services, on appropriations. Probably, and you're the historian, you know Alabama history very well.
John Sparkman may have been a long time ago when you and I were boys.
So
he was chairman of banking a long time, and Lister Hill, that combo was pretty powerful.
Probably been that long.
I've said Shelby has reached the pinnacle of the Sparkman Hill, I think, is our greatest U.S. senator.
I think he has it, but I'm interested in that subject because I have two colleagues who are running for the United States Senate who are very strong candidates.
Attorney generals?
For attorneys generals who are running for the Senate.
Now, what states are they?
In Nebraska, and then you mentioned Maine.
They're running for the Snowe seat, the Attorney
Snowe
General.
seat in Maine, and there's a person you should follow, and I know this isn't Alabama politics, but a great guy up there, Bill Schneider, who is a West Point graduate, military veteran.
This is in Maine?
In Maine. He's the Attorney General of Maine, and he's a great...
He'll probably win that seat then.
I think he has a very good chance, and so I'm not. I'm optimistic because people ask me, how can you fix? You talk about the Obamacare. There's an issue that we haven't talked about that affects Alabama. All of the EPA's range of regulations that they're trying to shut down coal, and
we'll have to get that next time.
That really affects our state and jobs here. The way to fix all that is to elect a new president, and get a Republican Congress. And I'm speaking as a partisan Republican, Steve. But
it's going to be an interesting year. But as we do, Luther, when you and I get vision, our time's up.
Well, thank you so much.
I hate our time's up. We get on the EPA thing next time. We covered a lot of ground with BP and the immigration and the Obamacare lawsuits, which you're involved in. And again, I appreciate you taking a first-hand approach to it. And we want to thank you, viewers, for watching Alabama Politics. We want to thank our Attorney General, Luther Strange, Big Luther Strange, for being my guest on Alabama Politics tonight. And we hope you viewers will tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. And again, we thank Luther Strange for being our guest.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Luther.
See you.
We'll talk for a second.
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.